All right, let's get into Fantasy Island playing out on the world stage live with Epstein and the plane, all right? And the tit for tattoos and the little man-childs and midgets and whatever else, okay? So we have seen the so-called pervert men and the storylines and whatnot and the puppy combs and in the past. So when I was a child and now and whatever, you can go to the bookstore or the library, and the women, for the most part, they have a section called the romance. And this romance has people like Fabio back in the day, that Fabio, that beau, that musky smell for that flower skunk on that Bambi and that Bam Biden and that BB Netanyahu and those things, and that thumper, humper, trumper, rumper. Him and that big beautiful Bill, and all those things are playing a role. So Disney has these little chipmunks called Chip and Dale. And then we see this Chris Farley on that Saturday Night Live doing a little Chip and Dale dance with Patrick Swayze for that little dirty dancing. Okay, that little grind session, all right? So, as we have the men's strip clubs, we got women's strip clubs too. And those of you who've been around the block and such have heard the stories, how those are a lot more than the men, or than the men's one where they go see the women, okay? And so there's a fantasy island, so-called, for the boys, the men, whatever. And there's a fantasy island for the girls, the women, okay? And there might be an island for a mixed match. And we've seen back in the day advertisements for hedonism. And I think that used to be in Jamaica or whatever, but this place where you can go where it's just like anything you want kind of thing. And then they got the cruise lines that kind of started those kinds of things. And then they got the Burning Man that's kind of like that, and those types of things. So as we've been shown the spectrum over here, we should start to see this other spectrum over here. And then I think today it was reported that Snoop Dogg's wife opened up a strip club for men where the women are dancing. So this would be like a woman's dark light coming or whatever, and pimping out the hoes, those ho-ho-hoes for the Christmas time frame. So this fantasy island and stuff, we could see also where this murder mystery island, for an updated little thing on the movie sequence here. There's the movie and the series, and these kind of tells two stories, but this murder mystery, but this is where we've seen some other things play out, where you got to leave your phone when you enter, and then somebody sneaks something in and they get photos or whatever, video, and then come back with it. And this is kind of where you have the replay of Alex Jones and the Bohemian Grove and those things going on. So with these little island episodes, that takes us to Tom Hanks and the sucker balls and the soccer balls and those things, and Zuckerberg did that Facebook, and I'm sure he might be tied, he could be tied to these things coming up, but he also built that doomsday bunker, or is building one on the Hawaii, and then we saw that Maui burn, and then Oprah's over there and whatever, and then Oprah says that Stedman loves to eat octopus in the morning. Okay, so he probably has like 8 women around, or him, Gail King and Oprah or whatever. He probably munches down on the buffet every morning for him. Okay, so the Tom Hanks. The Tom's a twin. The Hanks, the Ha and the Han. That Kansas and for the Chief, and the Chief is for the Biden that we saw exchange that jersey. So the soccer ball takes us to the Wilson soccer ball that he's talking to, or that's what he named it or whatever, but that takes us to the Owen Wilson, which is the Candace Owen that's going on right now, and then she's the Candace Amber Owen Farmer from the Rhode Island, and then so the Owen brothers, the Luke and Owen, they're from Dallas. They're the height of 5'11". That's the same height as that Taylor Swift for that suitcase, so-called, and the tailoring of that suit. And then she wore that jacket for the glittering jacket, and then that ties to the eclipse and such. And I'll post a photo of that actually that will tie in to some of those things. The soccer ball and the Zuckerberg and sucker balls or whatever, that ties to your Cristiano Ronaldo and the Ronaldo, that takes you to the dojo or the doju, and then he was in there on the days with Elon and Saudi Arabia and those types of things. The Luke is also tied to the Luke Skywalker, the Zelensky, and those types of things, coming against the Darth Vader, which is Trump on one aspect, as he's a dual light, the way that I kind of see it, but he's working in this side, and he's doing old world and new world. So the two boys there, the 54 and the 57-year-old Luke and Owen, they connect us to the Zoolander, the Wedding Crashers, the Starsky and Hutch, and they've been doing that 11-on-11 WLFL, NFL, that crapture where they catch that big dookie and they gotta get it out of their hands, so they gotta throw it to whoever, right? And then that's part of that hot potato, which is tied to your Idaho on one aspect, being next to Yellowstone, and then being next to well, that's where all your chips, the potatoes and such, but the Idaho, the ho, and it's also a panhandle state up there, but that's where we saw Oregon and such trying to break free from or the eastern western side of Oregon. They're trying to divide or whatever, but we could see that little divide on a state in a different way, and that quake going in Oregon through the so-called spiritual aspect first, and then it goes into the carnal, because we're seeing these little spiritual fleshly so-called intermingling as these things go into this little golden ratio into the resetting of things. The bottle rocket, Legally Blonde, that has the Elon in there, the Legally, that's all kind of coming in with your Ice Age, and the Royal Tenenbaums and the Sheinbaums down there, the Michiko, and he's down there next to Mexico, and the Old School, the Idiocracy, which is playing out now, your wrestlers and such all being brought into wherever, and then Vince McMahon being told that has a love affair with Bret Hart and whatever else. So the Charlie Kirk, Captain Kirk, the Shatner, the Star Trek, the Star Trek, the catching the shit for the football game, and those types of things. And then also Candace, let me see. Luke Wilson and Owen Wilson have a brother named Andrew Wilson. He's connected to the Whippet, which is the nitrous oxide. That would be down there in Boca Chica, where they have the nitrous oxide tanks that I saw when I went down there. Thinking I was going to work down at the old SpaceX, and I realized that I was in basically little Mexico down there. It wasn't. Either way, that's a whole other story. The time trap, idiocracy. All right, one of them's born on the 8/22/64, which has that 6/22 midnight hammer on there, and the 28s for the Z28, the alphabet 26. The flip side on the 46 for the begotten, for the begotten. The other one is 9/20 or 9/21. 71, that's 7/11 for the Trump trial thing or whatever, and then it's also tied to the 128 pistols on there on some counts, and then the 29 on the long count for the 49 presidency and those things. 11/18/68, which is a flip on the 89 for that time sequence that we've been watching as if you been in the so-called theater, and we're in that 8th year of the woman clothed in the sun and such. We can see these little different burns and burn sections as far as that part 2 playing out, and then the wild times ensues after that as we're kind of overlaying this time machine as it's taken off into the cliff, and that ties to your legion of demons that's thrown into the pigs, that's thrown off into the cliff, and all this little wild shit that's coming, and whatever else would be lining up. But and the 11/18 is the 9/11 breakdown, and then the dragon turn is 85 yesterday or whatever, Thanksgiving Day. So we'll wrap it up. But the Marley and Me and the Night Tat, the museum, that tit for tat and such. That Marley, the Mars mission, and those things that Elon's doing, and the Mars is the god of war, and the Mars, men are from Mars, women are from Venus. Those things are going on. The Low Key with Disney, and that's part of Thor's brother, and the Underworld, and the Underworld's going to tie to your petro dollar system in a way, and as that is the old global New World Order system, and they're trying to get off that New World Order system. So that's where you have to be the so-called Jesus and be that Asia, go to that Asia so-called, or the Asia Miners, follow the Asia Miners, and whatever else is lining up. But this is where Trump is doing a forward play in a new heaven and earth in a fashion, and he's also doing stuff with a dollar so-called, and giving that 1 cent. Hopefully you got that 1 cent to figure it out.